See, that wasn't so bad, was it?
Oh, I gotta say, that was fantastic.
What do you say we go back to your place for round 2?
Sounds good.
"28 disturbing cartoon moments, 7 levels. This iceberg is packed with the most shocking, disturbing cartoon moments ever. Let's start with some of your childhood favorites and some of their tamer moments, but just know that the deeper we go, the more twisted things will become. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Guillotine Shock. Tom and Jerry's French execution gag. In 1952, the Tom and Jerry short The Two Mouseketeers hit theaters. It wasn't anything like all of the other shorts, of course. In this story, Tom receives his marching orders from Captain Roquefort: guard the royal banquet with his life. If he fails, the guillotine is waiting. What follows is 7 minutes of typical cat-and-mouse mayhem, but the final moments change the vibe entirely. Jerry and Nibbles walk triumphantly down a Parisian street, their arms full of stolen banquet food. They've won. Then they see the guillotine in the distance. The blade rises up and comes down. We don't see Tom or his body or even any blood, but both mice gulp at what they've witnessed and Nibbles sighs, "Pauvre, pauvre pussycat," which is French for poor, poor pussycat.
Pauvre, pauvre pussycat.
Before shrugging and continuing their victory march. So yes, Tom has just been executed and the mice do not care. Usually Tom is just a hapless victim, but this short actually turns him into a straight-up victim of war. Television censorship eventually caught up with that scene. When the theatrical shorts hit television in 1965, networks began sanitizing content deemed inappropriate for young audiences. The guillotine scene in The Two Mouseketeers represented exactly the kind of thing that had to be cleaned up, so many networks cut the ending entirely. But what makes the guillotine scene particularly disturbing is how it operates within the cartoon's logic. Tom and Jerry cartoons typically reset between episodes, with Tom suffering elaborate punishment, but always returning for the next round unharmed. This ending breaks that pattern by suggesting permanent consequences rooted in historical truth. If he comes back, it might be a miracle. Gur's Bloodbath. Invader Zim cutscene. In the final stretch of Invader Zim episodes, director Steve Russell began embedding something deeply unsettling into the broadcast versions. It was a single-frame image of Gur in duty mode, his metallic body splattered entirely in bright red liquid that looks suspiciously like blood. Storyboard artist Chris Graham originally created this disturbing illustration to entertain the crew members, knowing that Nickelodeon would never approve such imagery for their family-friendly network. But they had so much fun that Steve Russell decided to secretly scatter the forbidden frames throughout the series anyway. He started inserting these single-frame glimpses into random moments, making them nearly impossible to detect without frame-by-frame analysis. Throughout the final 14 episodes of the series, the red-soaked Gur was hidden in plain sight, brief flashes lasting only a single frame, transparent or extremely faint. The first confirmed placement came during Bad Bad Rubber Piggy, where the Crimson Robot briefly materialized in the time portal as the final Rubber Pig entered. But after that, it was everywhere. Fans later discovered additional instances in Mortos der Soul Stealer and Plague of Babies, though Russell claimed there were many more undiscovered. The image typically showed only Gur's head covered in the bright red substance that suggested something violent had occurred, but whatever it was, we didn't know it. But when the show was cancelled in 2002, many began to believe that Nickelodeon had discovered the hidden frames and pulled the plug on the show entirely, leaving another 17 planned episodes unfinished. Actually, Nickelodeon said it had nothing to do with that and more about poor ratings among their target demographic of children, but many fans suspected the true reason was the implication of those subliminal flashes. Level 2. Robot Reality. Samurai Jack kills a human for the first time. Episode 93 of Samurai Jack starts with Jack battered and bleeding, his body floating downstream after a brutal temple encounter. The daughters of Aku have overwhelmed him, stripping away his armor piece by piece until he's reduced to nothing but survival instincts. When they finally discover him, he runs through corridors as his hallucinations whisper that this is hopeless, that he should give up. But survival kicks in when he faces the final daughter alone. She corners him in a passage, weapon drawn, ready to complete her sacred duty. Jack manages to reclaim his tuning fork sword, and in one swift motion, slices her throat. As her mask falls away, we see blood pooling on the stone floor. Not the usual black oil of robots, but red human blood. Suddenly he, and we, realize that he has just taken a human life. For decades, Jack has fought robots, demons, and mechanical beings without moral conflict. His code remained clean because his enemies weren't truly alive. But now that foundation crumbles as he stares at the young woman's face, seeing her humanity. She managed to stab him with her dagger in those final moments. Jack drags himself away, leaving a trail of blood behind him. The remaining daughters follow Jack's blood trail through the wilderness. But the episode totally changes the course of the show. This is no longer a black and white story, but something much more complex. The daughters of Aku have been conditioned to see him as a demon, just as he initially saw them as inhuman enemies. Both sides are human. Jack is now on a darker path. His hallucinations grow more twisted, manifesting as a demonic version of his younger self with razor teeth, taunting him about the blood on his hands. This show is no longer a children's adventure, but something far more psychologically complex. The blood trail he leaves is the perfect image. He's on the path toward a version of himself he never wanted to become. Lice Nazi, Zim's villain with Nazi references. The Invader Zim episode Lice starts with Melvin arriving at school late, scratching his head. Ms. Bitters immediately recognizes the telltale signs, but before anyone can react, the infestation spreads across the entire classroom until every child is contaminated. That's when Countess von Vermenstrasse, the delouser, arrives. The episode was originally actually titled Lice Nazi before Nickelodeon forced the name change, so you can see where we're going here. She arrives with assistants flanking her like stormtroopers as she surveys the contaminated masses, immediately declaring martial law over the entire school, segregating the children and herding them into separate rooms. But the Countess discovers that Zim appears immune to the lice, making him a specimen of particular interest. She and her team extract skin samples for research. Dib is horrified by the situation, recognizing that the school has become a medical facility. But the power structure shifts completely as the Countess assumes total control. The children now exist solely at the mercy of this foreign authority figure who views their bodies as resources to be harvested. Essentially, the school transforms into something resembling a concentration camp, complete with quarantine zones, medical experiments, and an authority figure whose accent and methods are very reminiscent of a certain dictator. In fact, the episode presents this systematic dehumanization as justified because of an emergency. The lice infestation is the excuse for every authoritarian overreach that follows, exactly like the Nazi ideology of the past. To even imagine this aired on Nickelodeon with no cuts or bans is pretty crazy. Mess Up, South Park's Lab Cop parody. In Little Crime Stoppers, South Park takes a typical children's thing, playing detective, and pushes it to an unthinkable extreme. The episode begins with Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny forming a detective club to solve trivial neighborhood mysteries for $1 each, but then the Park County Police Department decides to make them actual junior deputies. Their first task? Busting a lab. A real one. The children approach the operation with complete naivete, treating it like another game. But they instantly find themselves in a gunfight as the criminals open fire and end their own lives. The boys are unharmed through sheer absurd luck, but Lieutenant Dawson's response to this carnage is to scold the children for getting careless, as if they should have handled this ridiculous situation better. As the episode goes on, we discover more corruption in the adult police force, with officers mocking the children while simultaneously using them as expendable assets in these insanely dangerous operations. But then the department sends the children undercover into a strip club owned by Colorado's largest cartel leader. Another massive shootout erupts with real bullets flying while the kids respond with finger guns and bang bang sound effects. The criminals and corrupt cops take each other out in front of the children, culminating in Detective Murphy announcing he can no longer trust himself before taking his own life. When the dust settles and the police department offers the boys full detective positions, they finally recognize that real police work involves consequences far beyond their childhood games. They decide to go back to playing laundromat in Cartman's basement, which is less intense and disturbing, that's for sure. But if you prefer the intense and disturbing stuff, why not hit that subscribe button so you know when we upload a new video? And let's move on to the next level. Level 3. Firestarter Fun. Beavis inspires imitation incident. The first episode of Beavis and Butthead's third season, Comedians, aired on September 6, 1993. Beavis and Butthead, inspired by Andrew Dice Clay's wealthy lifestyle as a stand-up comedian, decide they too will become stand-up chameleons. Neither of them have any material, no joke-telling ability, and when Beavis takes the stage with only Butthead watching, he reaches for the only performance he understands: juggling burning newspapers. They burn the theater down, standing outside watching their destruction, laughing about how cool and funny they were. Exactly 1 month later, at 7 p.m. on October 6th, 5-year-old Austin Messner had watched that same episode in his family's mobile home in Moraine, Ohio. In the night, he found a lighter and flicked it, unintentionally setting fire to his bedding, then the walls of the trailer, and eventually the whole house. Austin's mother escaped, her boyfriend and Austin himself managed to get out, but Austin's 2-year-old sister could not. When firefighters arrived, they found her body. When the fire chief asked Austin where he had learned to play with fire, he said Beavis and Butthead. Within days, the story exploded as many started demanding the show be canceled entirely. MTV moved the show from its 7 p.m. time slot to 10:30 p.m. within a week. Every reference to fire was permanently cut from all existing episodes, including the original master tapes. The Comedians episode was banned entirely as a result. Virgin Mary bleeds. South Park's Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary is one of South Park's most offensive episodes ever made, which is quite an achievement when you consider the run of the series. Randy Marsh gets drunk, crashes his car, and loses his license for driving under the influence. He's forced to attend a court-mandated Alcoholics Anonymous meeting where he learns that alcoholism is a disease only a higher power can cure. So he starts drinking more, shaves his head bald, and confines himself to a wheelchair. Meanwhile, across town, a priest walks past a statue of the Virgin Mary and notices something disturbing. Blood is pouring from the statue's butt. The Catholics believe they've witnessed a miracle, but Randy becomes convinced this bleeding Virgin Mary can cure his disease. When he pushes his way to the front, the statue erupts, spraying blood directly into Randy's face. He declares himself cured, but 5 days later, Pope Benedict XVI personally investigates and confirms that the statue isn't bleeding from its butt at all, it's menstruating. The miracle is a hoax, so Randy goes back to drinking, only to moderate it when his son begs him. Pretty typical South Park stuff, but the episode aired December 7th, 2005, one day before the Catholic Feast of the Immaculate Conception. The Catholic League for Religious and Civil Rights was outraged, demanding Comedy Central apologize and permanently retire the episode. Even a Viacom board member watched the episode and issued his own condemnation, calling it an appalling and disgusting portrayal of the Virgin Mary. Comedy Central initially pulled the episode from future broadcasts, but they later backtracked, stating the group's claims were misleading and that the episode would return to air and appear on DVD. Clearly, they're not afraid of Catholics at all. Owl House Genocide. Bellos' plan to eliminate witches. In the Owl House, Emperor Bellos presents the Day of Unity as a grand celebration that will unite the human and demon realms, bringing peace and prosperity to all witches who follow his coven system. It's a nice little bit of propaganda, but it is all a lie. Under it all is his plan to exterminate every witch on the Boiling Isles. Genocide. Bellows is a 400-year-old witch hunter from 1600s Connecticut who, for centuries, has orchestrated a methodical campaign of manipulation not unlike how authoritarian regimes prepare populations for mass elimination. First, he staged false flag attacks against himself, blaming wild witches for violence they never committed. Then he spread propaganda that wild magic was chaotic and dangerous, claiming these practitioners had destroyed his family when in reality, he was the one orchestrating the violence. The coven system was a registration and control mechanism, with every witch who joined a coven receiving a sigil branded onto their arm. Those sigils were actually magical tracking devices that allowed Bellows to drain their life force simultaneously across the entire population. What makes this particularly uncomfortable is how closely it mirrors real-world genocidal tactics. The false flag operations, the propaganda campaigns against a targeted group, the registration system disguised as beneficial organization, and the final special event where the actual extermination takes place. These are documented patterns from history. Bellows even uses the promise of purification and creating a world for the worthy, which is literally genocidal language 101. Bellows succeeded in convincing victims to voluntarily receive the very marks that would be used to eliminate them, all while believing they were joining a movement for their own betterment. The Day of Unity very nearly succeeded because its true nature was hidden behind generations of careful psychological manipulation. Heavy stuff from a Disney cartoon, don't you think? Static Shock. Static Shock's second season brought one of the series' most shocking moments in the form of the episode Jimmy. The episode follows our hero, Virgil Hawkins, as he hangs out with a shy classmate named Jimmy, who endures endless bullying at the hands of some school kids. But in a brief glimpse of reality, Jimmy mentions that he could get his father's pistol, and we know as the audience that he means it. As the show moves toward the Halloween dance, Jimmy's anger and loneliness swirl until he actually brings the pistol to school just as he said he could. When bullies press him in the school gym, he panics, the gun fires, and his friend Richie goes down in pain. The show doesn't glamorize or sanitize what happens next. Richie is bleeding out, swept away to the hospital to recover, but the whole scene feels anything but heroic. This isn't the usual episode of Static Shock. There's no tidy moment where the bad kid is punished on screen or a hero's speech clears the air. Jimmy vanishes, placed in a locked center to reflect on what he almost did and confront the guilt that he feels as a result. At the end of the episode, Static turns to the camera and urges viewers, if you ever hear about a weapon, speak up to someone you trust. The whole episode is one of the most effective PSAs about preventing gun crime that you will ever see on a kid's cartoon. But that's why it was so shocking to many. The episode was running alongside lighthearted cartoons meant for children, but it was tackling a much more mature and serious topic than anything those shows were even trying to handle. And frankly, I applaud them for it. Butterfly Doom. SpongeBob Wormy. In the episode Wormy, Sandy Cheeks is leaving town for the weekend and asks SpongeBob and Patrick to pet sit her woodland creatures. Sure enough, they fall in love with Wormy, a tiny green caterpillar who plays games and spends quality time with his new underwater babysitters. But when SpongeBob and Patrick return the next morning, they discover that Wormy's jar is empty except for a discarded chrysalis and the ribbon they'd made for him. In its place is a large monarch butterfly that they've never seen before. Naturally, they believe that this winged creature has devoured their friend. But then the show cuts to live-action footage of a real insect. A horsefly complete with compound eyes, bristling legs, and that distinctive menacing buzz that horseflies make. It's actually pretty startling if you're not expecting it. The camera repeatedly cuts to these jarring close-ups throughout the episode, each time alongside that relentless buzzing that drowns out everything else. Kids across multiple countries reported nightmares because of this, some of them developing lasting phobias of flying insects. Parents complained that their children would run from the room or change the channel whenever the episode aired. So it's no surprise that it was banned outright in Indonesia and Italy due to complaints. Even today, it remains one of the scariest episodes of SpongeBob, with IMDb's parent guide warning that the episode will scar children for life. Danish drawings bloodshed. Mohammed cartoons inciting deadly riots. On September 30th, 2005, the Danish newspaper Jyllands-Posten published 12 editorial cartoons, most depicting the Islamic prophet Muhammad. The paper claimed that this was about challenging self-censorship, pushing back against fears artists had. It didn't go well. At first, Danish Muslims organized peaceful protests, filing legal complaints that were dismissed. But behind the scenes, a group of Danish imams compiled what became known as the Akari Laban dossier. This 43-page document included fake images they claimed showed Muhammad as a pig, images that weren't at all drawn by the artists, but included to drum up anger against them. These imams traveled across the Middle East to outrage terrorist organizations into acting. By February 2006, the situation was catastrophic. Syrian protesters stormed the Danish embassy in Damascus, setting it on fire along with the Norwegian embassy. In Beirut, thousands attacked the Danish consulate, gutting the 10-story building and turning on nearby Christian areas. Lebanon's interior minister resigned in shame. Danish products vanished from Middle Eastern shelves. Iran cut old trade ties with Denmark. Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE pulled Lego toys from stores. The Danish Prime Minister called it his country's worst crisis since World War II. More than 250 people died in riots and protests worldwide, all because of some drawings that were not even real. Decades later, the chaos is still ongoing. Kurt Vestergaard, who drew one of the more controversial cartoons, has to live under constant protection. On New Year's Day 2010, a Somali man broke into his home with an axe, screaming, "You must die." Kurt locked himself in a panic room while his 5-year-old granddaughter remained in the living room. Fortunately, the attacker was shot by police. Level 4. Bangladesh Ink Panic. Editor arrested for religious cartoon. 20-year-old Arifur Rahman had no idea what his pencil strokes would cause. He drew some fairly harmless comedy, a simple conversation between an elderly man and a boy about names. The elder explains how Muslims often prefix Muhammad to names out of respect. The boy, trying to be clever, calls his pet a Muhammad cat. On September 17, 2007, that cartoon appeared in the satirical supplement of Bangladesh's biggest newspaper, Prothom Alo. But Bangladesh was 8 months into a military-backed state of emergency. All protests were banned, the army patrolled the streets, and civil rights had been suspended. Yet copies of Prothom Alo were already burning outside mosques. Islamic groups were furious, demanding exemplary punishment for both Rahman and the newspaper's editor. The government immediately ordered Rahman's arrest and seized all copies of the offending issue. But now the Islamic groups wanted the complete shutdown of the publication. Despite the emergency government's strict ban on all demonstrations, thousands of protesters poured out of Dhaka's National Mosque. Over 9,000 people defied military rule, chanting demands for the editor's execution. For months, Arifur Rahman remained behind bars while his case moved through Bangladesh's courts, and the emergency government, which had promised to restore order, just sat and watched as the rage exposed how truly fragile and useless their authority really was. When Rahman was finally released in March 2008, it was only because the police officer pressing charges had repeatedly failed to appear in court. So the only reason he actually walked free was incompetence, not justice. Coat of Columbine. Zim's trench coat design controversy. Jonan Vasquez created Dib Membrane with one specific vision in mind, a paranormal investigator wrapped in an oversized black trench coat. That outfit would define the character's outsider status and give him the dramatic flair that matched his obsession with exposing Zim's alien nature. But when Nickelodeon executives saw the design, they froze. This was 1999, and just months earlier, 2 teenagers had walked into Columbine High School wearing long black trench coats, carrying weapons beneath the fabric. The Columbine massacre was so recent that Nickelodeon worried that Dib's trench coat would remind viewers of those 2 shooters. They wanted the trench coat gone, but Vasquez wouldn't budge. The trench coat was Dib's whole identity. Without it, the character would lose his mysterious edge, his visual connection to classic paranormal investigators and conspiracy theorists. Nickelodeon ultimately lost this particular battle. Dib kept his trench coat, but the network's anxiety about the character extended beyond clothing. Executives began questioning whether Dib was funny enough, interesting enough, worth the potential controversy. They wanted him cut from the show entirely, viewing him as a liability rather than a protagonist. This led to God Save the Dib, Vasquez's desperate attempt to make the character more palatable to nervous executives. The most notable change was making Dib's head disproportionately large compared to his body, creating a visual gag that became a running joke throughout the series. Fortunately, it worked. When the show aired and Dib became a massively popular character, Nickelodeon could no longer push back against him. They had to simply accept he was a key part of the show's success. R-rated remake. Family Guy rapes and murders The Simpsons. The war between The Simpsons and Family Guy started with such a tiny visual gag that most viewers probably missed it, if they saw it at all. In the Italian Bob episode, Peter Griffin's mugshot flashes during a montage with the word plagiarist stamped underneath. That's it, 16 seconds that would spark what Fox executives would later call the most personal attack in animated television history. The Family Guy team watched that episode and decided to retaliate with something far, far, far worse. 2 years later, in Movin' Out, Brian's song, the Griffin family sits around their living room when a Simpsons promotional banner scrolls across the bottom of the screen featuring Marge Simpson. Quagmire crashes into the frame, grabs Marge, and drags her off screen while she fights back, her protests audible as they disappear. What happens next occurs out of view, but we know what happened. When they return to screen, Marge voices satisfaction with what just happened, inviting him back to her house for round 2. At the Simpson residence, Homer catches them in the act, so Quagmire produces a gun and systematically eliminates every member of the Simpson family. Homer, Bart, Lisa, even baby Maggie. Fox executives were horrified. They demanded MacFarlane cut the entire sequence, but he wouldn't. During DVD commentary sessions, he accused Fox of cowardice, claiming they were afraid of James L. Brooks, and pointing out the hypocrisy that Simpsons had mocked Family Guy multiple times, but when Family Guy fought back, suddenly everyone wanted to end the feud. But the executives stood firm. The scene would never air on Fox. However, the banned footage found its way to audiences anyway. Adult Swim aired the uncensored version, and the scene appeared on DVD releases. Tommy's Tapeworm, Mr. Meaty. It's hard to argue that Mr. Meaty was anything but Nickelodeon's weirdest sitcom, honestly. But the Tapeworm episode was a whole other level of weird. The episode kicks off when Parker's insatiable appetite leads him to gulp down a raw burger that comes back to haunt him in the nastiest way possible. It turns out that he just consumed a massive tapeworm, which feasts on everything he eats before he even eats it. When Josh discovers what's actually going on inside Parker's stomach, he comes up with a way to get it out of there. And it's pretty gross, actually. He rigs a fishing line and baits it with sausage inside Parker's stomach, slowly reeling out the long, wriggling parasite in a scene so graphic that it traumatized many fans. When the tapeworm is finally released, it's as disgusting as we expected. But rather than disposing of it, the boys sell their prize to a zookeeper who immediately gulps it down himself. Good lord. Compared to other Mr. Meaty episodes, which usually end in a quick gross out or a silly pun, this one commits fully to its body horror premise, and it left a massive impression on the young children who saw it. Go on any Reddit thread or forum talking about the episode, and you'll find a community of people who remember this episode vividly. For some of them, it even gave them a unique new OCD, making them insist every food item is cooked thoroughly. Slender Man's shadow, linked to a real-life stabbing by minors. Slender Man was born online in 2009 as part of a forum challenge that asked for spooky edits. The winner showed 2 black and white photos of children with a tall, faceless figure looming behind them. It was so effective because of how simple it was. Obviously, the creator wanted to spark unease and fear, but from there, the story grew, completely outgrowing him. More people added tentacles, more powers, more stalking in woodlands, turning this edit into a full-on legend with rumors that the Slender Man could silence voices and erase memories, drawing victims into a void beyond help. It felt inevitable now. Someone was going to make it a reality at some point. In Waukesha, Wisconsin, two 12-year-olds learned about the Slender Man through these online tales, but they didn't know it was an edit. They fully believed he was real. After a birthday sleepover, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Wire led their friend into a nearby forest, whispering that they needed to prove their loyalty to Slender Man. Once they got off the trail, Wire told Peyton to lie down and cover herself with sticks and leaves to hide as part of a hide-and-seek trick. Then, Morgan pulled a kitchen knife and drove it again and again into Peyton's arms, legs, and torso, 19 times in total. Anissa stood watch, scanning the woods as if waiting for a sign. Peyton was gone, and Slender Man wasn't coming to see what they had done. So Morgan and Anissa fled, leaving Peyton behind. At an interrogation, both girls said they had to carry out the act to earn Slender Man's protection and out of fear that he would harm their families otherwise. The trial revealed their fixation on this total myth, all built out of one edit made by an artist. Fusili's Puppets. Courage the Cowardly Dog. We could choose just about any episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog to be disturbing, but The Great Fusili has a unique body horror premise that just hits a little more intensely than any other. In the episode, The Great Fusili rolls into nowhere like a traveling showman offering Courage, Muriel, and Eustace a shot in the spotlight. Muriel and Eustace eagerly accept, coaxed onto the stage for a simple act. Courage is horrified, but then he stumbles upon a backstage gallery of grotesque puppets, each bearing uncomfortably close resemblances to missing faces from earlier acts. Fusili is literally stealing them and turning them into his act. And now his beloved Muriel and Eustace have joined them as strings twist from the rafters to their limbs, transforming them into living marionettes. Muriel's features are frozen in an eerie smile, Eustace's sneer stuck in a new wooden form. Fusili is overjoyed with his new toys even as Courage lunges for their hands. But it isn't any good. They're basically gone. When Fusili meets his own fate beneath his puppet pedestal, Courage rescues the bodies, yet on the way home, he doesn't race to seek help. By twilight, he's back at home, conducting Muriel's laughter, coaxing Eustace's grumbles, manipulating the puppets himself as though they're alive, because they're clearly not. That's one of the darkest endings in any episode of Courage ever made. There's not even a hint at anything getting better. This is, as far as we know, just the rest of Courage's life now. Level 5. Shootout at Dratini. Pokemon Legend of Dratini. On November 25th, 1997, one of the most controversial episodes of Pokemon in history aired for the first and last time in Japan. The Legend of Dratini introduced viewers to an unexpected tense safari zone which was full of real guns, and people more than willing to fire them. Rather than focusing on playful encounters, the episode features a groundskeeper who treats literally every rule break like a life-or-death moment. Inside the warden's rustic office, a grizzled veteran named Kaiser drapes a sepia-toned photo of his long-lost Dratini on the wall, then twice brands a shiny revolver at Ash and his friends just to prove his point. When Ash reaches for Safari Balls, Kaiser makes it clear that his firearm, which he calls Thunderbolt, will burn any rule breaker, even aiming at Ash's own head. No wonder people didn't like it. But then things get more intense as Team Rocket barges in, flanking Kaiser with 2 more real guns and later hurling an electric bomb into a serene lake to flush out the hidden Dratini. Literally every twist leans harder into action movie tropes, with merciless gags about getting shot juxtaposed against frantic attempts to save both trainers and Pokemon. Honestly, the whole thing is so heightened and tongue-in-cheek that it's really not that bad for older viewers. But 4Kids Entertainment deemed all of this relentless gunplay too intense for young audiences and declined to produce an English dub, leaving the episode buried outside Asia. Its disappearance created one of the series' most glaring story gaps. In this episode, Ash earns his 30 Tauros, yet later episodes casually feature them without explanation. Many viewers had no idea where or how he got those, leaving many collectors and longtime trainers chasing down bootleg tapes of this safari caper to piece together the missing slice of Ash's early journey. Rude Removal, Dexter's Laboratory. For years, Rude Removal was one of the most sought-after cartoons in the world. It was the Dexter's Laboratory that nobody wanted you to see, partially because of how crass and foul-mouthed it was. The episode begins with Dexter's latest project, a schematic for a machine called the Rude Removal System. Dexter, the boy genius, intends it to strip Dee Dee of her rude manners, but a frantic fight flips the switch and two versions of each sibling spill out. One British and polished and prim, the other dripping with unchecked attitude. The rude pair swagger in with thick New York accents, blurting out bleeped tirades that are pretty obviously full of foul curse words. Cartoon Network executives were horrified by what they saw, believing that it was not suitable for youngsters. Standards and practices agreed, effectively banning the episode before a single broadcast. But word got out about this forbidden episode that nobody wanted the audience to see. Over the years, the creators began screening the episode at animation festivals and Comic-Con, showing a select audience this highly exclusive and sought-after episode. Now, however, those who saw it wanted the uncensored version, and given how much Cartoon Network hated the episode, that seemed unlikely. However, Adult Swim uploaded the episode for everybody to see on January 2nd, 2013. The bleeps remained, but at least the episode was finally available for everybody to see. Buffalo Gals, Cow and Chicken. Generally speaking, Cow and Chicken is one of the most harmless cartoons with very few, if any, controversies. But Buffalo Gals certainly remains one of the most notorious episodes in cartoon history. It somehow managed to pack more questionable content into 11 minutes than most shows dare to attempt in an entire season. The episode introduces a motorcycle gang of rough-looking women called the Buffalo Gals, who burst into Cow and Chicken's home wearing buffalo helmets and immediately start munching on the family's carpets. I'll just cut to the chase. This whole episode? Just one big joke at the expense of lesbians. Creator David Weiss built the entire episode around tired stereotypes about women who love women. The gang leader goes by Munch Kelly and carries business cards decorated with two female symbols. When the family's father panics about the intruders, Mom casually explains they're not after you, while the gang members make it clear they despise Chicken. The whole episode was full of innuendos and not-so-subtle wordplay gags that none of the kids understood. But parents flooded Cartoon Network with angry phone calls and complaint letters after the premiere. The network, clearly caught off guard by the intensity of their response, yanked Buffalo Gals from circulation immediately. The episode aired exactly once before disappearing forever, replaced in all future broadcasts and streaming releases by orthodontic police. What made the situation worse was how dated and cruel the humor felt, even by 1990 standards. The Buffalo Gals were portrayed as aggressive, disgusting, and fundamentally antagonistic toward men. Even if you got the joke, it was cruel. While David Weiss had built a reputation for sneaking adult humor past network censors, Buffalo Gals seemed to be a step too far. The show's usual blend of surreal humor and hidden innuendo worked when it stayed clever and obscure, but this episode abandoned subtlety entirely, and it didn't work for anybody. Even today, Buffalo Gals remains buried deep in Cartoon Network's vault, absent from streaming platforms and DVD releases. The network simply decided to pretend the episode never existed. Ren and Stimpy's Adult Party Cartoon. Back in 1991, Ren and Stimpy made waves on Nickelodeon by pushing boundaries with gross-out humor and disturbing imagery that somehow slipped past children's television standards boards. The show's creator, John Kricfalusi, had already been fired from his own creation due to creative conflicts, but one episode in particular, Man's Best Friend, proved too extreme. This banned episode featured graphic violence, including scenes where Ren beats a character with a paddle and would later serve as the unofficial pilot for what came next. When Spike TV approached Kricfalusi in 2003 to create an adult version of his cartoon, they specifically told him they wanted something extreme. What emerged was Ren and Stimpy Adult Party Cartoon, 6 episodes that took every disturbing element from the original and amplified it. Billy West, who had voiced Stimpy in the original series, refused to return, stating the new show wasn't funny and would damage his career. He was right. Adult Party Cartoon reveled in explicit content without any restraint, making its characters consume bodily fluids including nasal mucus, saliva, and vomit, comic graphic acts with animals, explicit nudity, and violence. The most notorious episode, Ren Seeks Help, showed flashbacks of Ren as a child engaging in cruelty to small animals, including electrocuting, running over, and setting fire to a frog. Also, that scene of Ren attacking a horse. Spike TV had ordered 9 episodes, but only aired 3 before the network pulled the entire show from its schedule in July 2003. Critics and fans universally panned the series, calling it one of the worst animated shows ever made. The failure was because of the fundamental misunderstanding of what made the original work. The constraints and censorship battles that had shaped the Nickelodeon version forced innovation and creativity. Without those boundaries, Adult Party Cartoon became an exercise in extremes for its own sake, mistaking shock value for comedy and graphic content for artistic expression. 3 episodes was all audiences could stomach. Porygon Seizure Attack, Pokemon. On December 16, 1997, at 6:51 p.m., an episode of Pokemon aired across Japan. It was titled Deno Senshi Porygon. The story follows Ash and friends as they encounter a computer system to fix a malfunction, but the plot really isn't what made this episode infamous. About 20 minutes in, Pikachu uses a Thunderbolt attack to stop a barrage of missiles from hitting their target. The animators created the explosion with a rapid-fire sequence of red and blue flashes alternating at a speed of 12 times per second for 6 seconds straight. The screen fills with strobe effects, selling the illusion well, but it was a little too intense for most people. Hundreds of viewers across Japan began to feel ill. They had to call emergency services, reporting blurred vision, dizziness, headaches, nausea. Some were collapsing, convulsing, others losing consciousness. By the end of the night, nearly 700 people were taken to hospitals, with thousands more reporting symptoms in the days that follow. The incident was dubbed Pokemon Shock by the media and quickly became national news. The animation studio was questioned by police, turning the situation into such a calamity that Nintendo's stock dropped. The episode was pulled from rotation immediately, never to air again, not in Japan or anywhere else, with the anime going on a 4-month hiatus and prompting a major change in broadcast standards. Japanese TV was now legally required to add warnings about watching from a safe distance in a well-lit room. Porygon, the digital Pokemon at the center of the episode, was totally banished from the show and reduced in the franchise generally, despite Pikachu's attack being the actual trigger. But who would want to punish Pikachu? Level 6. Choked by Blades, Infinity Train. Few moments in animated shows hit like the death of Special Agent Mace in Book 2 of Infinity Train. In Episode 8, The Wasteland, Mace, a rigid enforcer in the mirror world, pursues MT alongside his partner. The chase hits its dramatic climax when a speeding train car looms over them. Shackled together, MT and Mace are abruptly hurled into the rail. In a split second of horror, the wheels slash right through his torso, splitting him in 2. But then, MT decides to finish him off, pushing his upper half into the cogs of the train. Fans already knew this was a deeply emotional, mature show with inventive puzzles, but they had never anticipated such stark body horror. All across the internet, people were trying to come to terms with the tragedy they had just witnessed, how there was no chance at him coming back or having the whole thing be a fake-out. The episode had cut to black without any hint at undoing it, showing us that this episode was not playing around. Behind the scenes, the creators had actually almost considered changing the death, believing it may well be too intense for viewers. But they wanted to explore darker territory, and the moment that Mace splits apart marks the shattering of innocence in this world. You may love the characters, but the stakes are real, and they will go away at some point or another. Mesmer Eyes, Gravity Falls Northwest Mansion. Northwest Mansion Mystery is probably one of Gravity Falls' most genuinely upsetting episodes, which is saying something. When Dipper and Pacifica explore the Northwest Estate's supernatural secrets, the episode starts to create an atmosphere full of dread, but nothing can prepare viewers for where the episode ends. From the very beginning, the episode masterfully establishes its creepy tone, showing the mansion to be full of creepy portraits, shadowy halls, and mounted animal heads that start bleeding from their mouths and eyes. This imagery alone pushed Disney's content boundaries, but it's going to get worse. Eventually, the lumberjack ghost unleashes his full fury. After Preston Northwest refuses to honor his family's century-old promise, this vengeful spirit begins transforming every party guest into wooden statues. Yep, we've got body horror. In fact, Preston Northwest's fate proves particularly nightmarish. As the ghost's power overwhelms him, Preston's body jerks and contorts in unnatural ways, pulled by invisible strings like a marionette. His limbs move against his will, arms and legs snapping into rigid poses while his face twists in terror. The visuals of the scene suggest that something is happening that goes far beyond a simple magical transformation. It implies his consciousness remains trapped inside the wooden shell, aware but helpless as supernatural forces manipulate his body. For fans of the show, it was shocking how far Disney allowed the creators to push the intensity. Grown viewers had nightmares about the scene because of the idea of losing control of their own body despite being conscious. Did parents react as well? Not so much, but the wooden transformation became a frequently referenced moment in fan discussions about the show's most terrifying scenes, often ranking alongside other notorious Gravity Falls horror moments like the shapeshifter and Bill Cipher's reality-warping chaos, pulling out deer teeth. The body horror was totally unexpected, but it had the exact right impact on the audience. Level 7. Drunk Toon Death. Tiny Toons, 1 beer. The Tiny Toons episode 1 Beer starts with Acme Luniversity's most recognizable faces, Buster Bunny, Plucky Duck, and Hampton J. Pig, stumbling upon a beer and, with a mix of curiosity and bravado, deciding to split it. What follows is a wild, spiraling ride that is not what anybody expected from this show. The effects hit fast, and suddenly these beloved characters are transformed, their appearances shifting into exaggerated, ragged versions of themselves. They have stubble, their eyes are bloodshot, and their voices start slurring as they lurch from one bad decision to the next. And the story really doesn't pull any punches. After their first taste, the group's antics escalate. They wander the city, swipe a police car, and end up barreling toward a cliff. The car soars through the air, crashes into a cemetery, and the three float upwards, now sporting angel wings. Yup, dead. But then the curtain drops. The angels peel off their costumes, revealing that the whole thing was staged. An elaborate PSA for the children watching to avoid drinking. The message is clear, but the delivery is anything but gentle. When 1 Beer aired, the backlash was immediate. Parents were furious, networks panicked, and the episode was yanked from rotation almost instantly. The combination of slapstick, dark humor, and the sight of familiar faces meeting such a fate proved too much for many. The message was good, but the fact that they killed beloved characters to do it? Not so much. Best Friend's Betrayal. Ren and Stimpy, Man's Best Friend. Man's Best Friend looks like a simple return of George Liquor, the belt-toting disciplinarian who burst into Ren and Stimpy's history in Dog Show. But this time he drags the duo from a pet store window into his claustrophobic household, transforming their lives into a brutal endurance trial. Forced to share a single fishbowl mattress, they snap awake to find their new master in a drill sergeant outfit, barking impossible tasks at them that they have to follow. First, they must press their butts into newspapers for push-ups, a bizarre choreography that leaves Stimpy beaming and Ren sputtering. Then comes couch meditation. Sit, but never sit, if that makes any sense. George dangles cigars as high-stakes bribes, a tobacco-fumed reward system that is, at minimum, animal cruelty. But then the true turning point erupts when George, suiting up, invites Ren and Stimpy to attack him. Stimpy downplays the offer with a meek loyalty, but Ren, frayed by relentless drills and mocking jabs about his softness, seizes a rowing oar and absolutely beats the heck out of him, leading to some truly disturbing, gory, graphic shots that end up taking his eyeball right out of the socket. As George staggers free, Ren is nervous, expecting revenge, but instead he's lauded as a true champion and handed cigars for all. Nickelodeon executives recoiled at the intense gore and tobacco rewards, which went against all children's programming standards. Citing this episode's unairable intensity, the network shelved Man's Best Friend and severed ties with creator John Crispolucci, spurring the abrupt shift of Ren and Stimpy's production to a news studio. If you haven't fully got your fix of disturbing cartoons yet, why not check out this video on the most disturbing SpongeBob horror episodes?